Buckminster Fuller, the man you just heard from, is an engineer, inventor, mathematician, and philosopher.
He has been called a visionary, a prophet, a genius.
Mr. Fuller, of all of the people that I have interviewed, you are the most difficult to define. You called yourself a random element. Other people have called you an experience.
An author, a designer, a scientist.
He's even a cosmogonist, which I neither know how to spell nor do I know what it is.
A New World thinker, if there ever was one, or Buckminster Fuller.
Those among us are discouraged who don't want to specialize or over-specialize. If they want to let their curiosity make them wonder, they are vilified at times culturally and in institutionalized way. Nobel laureate Abdus Salam said that specialization in one area is the sterilization of one's intelligence. And perhaps Fuller became a real example of what Salam said. Throughout his life, he would interplay between many disciplines. One intention was continuously reverberated throughout his life, to use technology in a way that whole humanity could enjoy Earth's resources in a sustainable fashion, getting maximum out of minimum, whether it was his books, lectures, or his inventions.
It is highly feasible. This is the real news of our century. It is highly feasible to take care of all of humanity at a higher standard of living than anybody has ever experienced or dreamt of, to do so without having anybody profit at the expense of another, so everybody can enjoy the whole earth, and can all be done by 1985.
Born on July 12, 1895, in Milton, Massachusetts, Fuller spent much of his youth at Bear Island, owned by his family. He would recall later in life that time spent on Bear Island was very important for him. He saw how boatsmen built their tools, being mechanics and inventors at the same time. He was fascinated by their process. He attended Probelian kindergarten. He was unpopular, badly behaved, and bullied at school. One of first days at school, a teacher brought some toothpicks and semi-dry peas and asked class to make structures. With his hyperopia, Fuller was only able to see bugs. He had no feelings about structural lines. He couldn't see, so he made use of other senses. He tried to make something that would work. Pulling and pushing, he found out the triangle held its shape while nothing else did. Other children made rectangular structures. His teacher, fascinated, called other teachers to look at the structure he had just made. Throughout his school time, he had high grades in two subjects, science and mathematics. His one trouble with teachers was he asked too many questions. He would argue with them and dispute.
I remember my arithmetic. I learned my fractions very nicely, and then I learned how to manipulate the fractions. And one day the teacher said, "I'm going to teach you a better way." You wonder if I shouldn't give you a better way the first time. So this is called decimals. And by then we had all those fractions, so we said here's a 1/8 is 0.125, and a quarter is 0.25, and a third is 0.333, goes out the window and over the hill. Some of the things stayed in the room, and other things went out the window, and you wondered whether this really is a better system or not, and you wondered whether the teacher knew what you were talking about.
During childhood, he often made items from materials he found in woods and sometimes made his own tools. He experimented with designing new apparatus for human propulsion of small boats. By age 12, he had invented a push-pull system for propelling a rowboat by use of an inverted umbrella connected to the transom with a simple oar lock, which allowed the user to face forward to point the boat towards its destination. Years later, he decided that this sort of experience had provided him with not only an interest in design but also a habit of being familiar with and knowledgeable about the materials that his later projects would require. Fuller attended Milton Academy in Massachusetts and after that began studying at Harvard College, where he was affiliated with Adam House. He was expelled from Harvard twice, first for spending all his money partying and then after having been readmitted for his irresponsibility and lack of interest. By his own appraisal, he was a non-conforming misfit in the fraternity environment. Between his sessions at Harvard, Fuller worked in Canada as a mechanic in textile mill and later as a laborer in meatpacking industry. He also served in US Navy in World War I as a shipboard radio operator, as an editor of publication, and as a crash rescue boat commander. After discharge, he worked again in the meatpacking industry, acquiring management experience. In 1917, he married Anne Hewlett, and it was the same year he invented energetic geometry. His daughter Alexandra died in 1922 of complications from polio and spinal meningitis just before her 4th birthday. Fuller dwelled on her death, suspecting that it was connected with the Fuller's damp and drafty living conditions. This provided motivation for Fuller's involvement in Stockade Building Systems, a business which aimed to provide affordable and efficient housing. In 1927, at age 32, Fuller lost his job as a president of Stockade. The Fuller family had no savings, and the birth of their daughter, Allegra, in 1927 added to their financial challenges. Fuller drank heavily and reflected upon the solution to his family's struggles on long walks around Chicago. During the autumn of 1927, Fuller contemplated suicide by drowning in Lake Michigan so that his family could benefit from a life insurance payment. Fuller said that he had experienced a profound incident which would provide direction and purpose for his life. He felt as though he was suspended several feet above the ground, enclosed in a wide sphere of light. A voice spoke directly to Fuller and declared, quote, "From now on, you need never await temporal attestation to your thought. You think the truth. You do not have the right to eliminate yourself. You do not belong to you. You belong to universe. Your significance will remain forever obscure to you. But you may assume that you are fulfilling your role if you apply yourself to converting your experiences to the highest advantage of others." Fuller said that this experience led to a profound re-examination of his life. He ultimately chose to embark on an experiment to find what a single individual can contribute to changing the world and benefiting all humanity. In 1927, Fuller resolved to think independently, which included a commitment to search for principles governing the universe and help advance the evolution of humanity in accordance with them. Finding ways of doing more with less to end that all people anywhere can have more and more. Fuller realized industrial production must be used to fulfill one of the most important human needs in modern life: homes. He proclaimed to design a revolutionary house that could be transported via airways. By 1928, Fuller was living in Greenwich Village and spending much of his time at the popular cafe Romani Mary's and sleeping in studio of sculptor friend Antonio Salem. Fuller accepted a job decorating the interior of the cafe in exchange for meals, giving informal lectures several times a week. He asked Salem for materials so he could make a model of Dymaxion house, as it was called.
Said he would like to make a model of the Dymaxion house. I didn't know what he meant by Dymaxion house. He said, "Well, you see, I like to make model." So I gave him a card table, which he put in the middle of the studio.
For next 6 months, Fuller worked at the model, and after finishing it, he presented it to the Architectural League.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a first and very crude paper model of a house designed for industrial reproduction. Its requirements must be that it should be proof against fire, flood, tornado, earthquake, electrical storms, marauders. It must be proof against drudgery, that is, in it must be accessories with which a housewife can accomplish all her house cleaning within 15 minutes.
Dymaxion house was not popularized nor accepted by society at large. In 1933, amidst Great Depression in US, Fuller left with money from his investors to make a car that he thought could turn the economy around. Fuller was, just like in case of Dymaxion house, extraordinarily ambitious about Dymaxion car as well. He wanted the car to be all in one package, which could fly as well as be driven whenever required. But Fuller realized its limitations. Fuller formed the Dymaxion Corporation and built 3 prototypes with noted naval architect Starling Burgess and a team of 27 workmen, using donated money as well as family inheritance. It was utterly radical visually in 1933. It was so radical that New York police asked Fuller to not drive the car in Midtown Manhattan since it would cause traffic jams as people were awed by it. Fuller focused on the landing and taxiing quality and noted severe limitations in its handling. The team made constant improvements and refinements to the platform. The Dymaxion car was featured prominently at Chicago's 1933-34 Century of Progress World's Affair, where investors traveled from all around the world. For a while, it was a riding high moment for Fuller. Investors landed and took their first ride in Dymaxion car. The car had an accident and the driver was killed, and hence other 2 investors pulled out and decided they had nothing to do with the project, leaving questions over Dymaxion's unconventional design. But later investigations proved that the accident was not caused by Dymaxion car itself. Financially, car didn't do any good. Fuller noted as well that the Dymaxion car code was an invention that could not be made available to the general public without considerable improvements. End quote. Fuller maintained that Dymaxion car was never intended as a commercial venture. If it were mass produced, perhaps the face of automobiles would have been totally different today.
Money which I've been given into cash I had in my pocket now arrived in Bridgeport, Connecticut to produce this new ground taxing quality of the armored medium transport. Because it just began going to go on the ground, I knew people would call it an automobile. It wasn't designed just to be an automobile at all. She was so extraordinarily stable, and my center of gravity was very, very low. And for the first vehicle that ever had the center of gravity forward to the midpoint of the wheelbase. It did prove to be a very good vehicle and did have very high efficiency. With 11 passengers, I averaged over 22 miles per gallon. Sometimes I got as much as 30 with 11 passengers. It was very, very high. A front-steered car with the kingpins can only steer up to 34 degrees angle. My rear rudder post I could turn so I could give it 90 degrees rudder if I wanted. This meant then when I wanted to come into park, there would be a space just, say, 6 inches longer than my Dymaxion car. I would simply bring my nose into the curb and then throw my rear wheel sideways, and she went right and dropped like that.
I think it's time for a quick break. Get comfortable, readjust, and we will be back in